There's no doubt that hundreds of missing person cases are rather bizarre and unexplained. But the following cases are particularly perplexing and have left investigators baffled for years, and will likely continue doing so for many years to come. Number 5. 22-year-old Christine NICKLE Seal and her husband Lynn Seal had a blossoming marriage to the outside world. The two had welcomed a son into the world 2 years prior, and everything seemed to be going smoothly. Christine's son was the center of her universe, and those who knew her described her as a dedicated and loving mother. In 1972, Christine disappeared without a trace, leaving her picturesque family behind. But what happened to Christine, and why did she disappear? Christine and her brother Bruce had spent most of their childhood hopping from place to place. Their father, Doyle, was a master sergeant in the US Army and moved from base to base. In 1967, the family settled down in Cassville, Missouri, and months later, Christine graduated from high school. Christine's future was bright. She was an intelligent, hard-working young woman, and the possibilities for her were endless. She decided to pursue her dreams and enrolled at the Hilkers College of Cosmetology. As part of her training, Christine worked at Duane's Beauty Shop in Missouri, where she would continue to work after her training was completed. Things were slowly falling into place for Christine, and in 1967, she met the love of her life, Lynn Seal. By July of '68, the two were married and were ready to start their new lives together. Christine's family took a liking to Lynn and were overjoyed that their daughter was happy. A year after they were wed, the two welcomed their son, David, into the world. From the moment that David was born, Christine's life changed. She put her dreams on hold to care for her son and ensured that he was raised in a safe and loving environment. By 1972, Christine and Lynn lived in a trailer on the Calico Dairy Farm in Verona, Missouri. While money was sometimes a struggle, Christine and Lynn made it work. Lynn worked at the Calico farm while Christine continued to pursue her career in cosmetology part-time. According to Christine's family, their financial situation did bring the couple stress, but there was no indication of any trouble in the marriage. Life went on as expected for the Nichols family. That was until one breezy June afternoon. June 19, 1972 was a day of celebration as it was Father's Day. Doyle and Trudy, Christine's mother, had visited their trailer the day before to celebrate the holiday. While June 19th was a holiday, Lynn still had to work in order to provide for the family. At 8 a.m. that morning, Lynn left the trailer and made the short walk to work. Lynn would later tell investigators that Christine and David were still asleep when he left. Between 9:45 a.m. and 10 a.m., Lynn returned to the trailer during his mid-morning break. As the trailer was located on the farm, it wasn't unusual for Lynn to check up on Christine during the day. When he gently slid the door open to the trailer, he heard David crying. Lynn reached the kitchen and found his son crying on the floor. He called out to his wife but received no response. After checking all of the rooms, Lynn realized his wife was missing. Lynn immediately called the Lawrence County Sheriff's Department and Christine's parents. When they heard the news, they broke down. To them, it didn't make sense that Christine would run off, leaving her son behind. The Lawrence County Sheriff's Office began searching every inch of the trailer for Christine, extending their search outside. Lynn was extensively interviewed and provided a solid alibi for his movements that morning. Shortly after Christine's disappearance, an unlikely witness materialized. Daryl Meyer, a postman. The postman told investigators that he'd visited the Nickel Seal home at around 9:30 a.m. that morning to deliver the post. When he arrived at the trailer, he saw David sitting by the front screen alone, crying. He thought nothing of it and continued his rounds. This new sighting gave investigators a solid window of time for Christine's disappearance. She disappeared between 8 a.m. and 9:30 a.m. But who was responsible? News of Christine's disappearance quickly spread throughout the small towns of Missouri like wildfire. Over 500 volunteers turned up to help the Lawrence County Sheriff's Office and Christine's family. Residents of the farm and beyond were plunged into a nightmare. People began locking their doors during the day and night and stocked up on self-defense items. One thing puzzled residents, though. The Calico farm was well populated and busy, so why did nobody hear the attack? Christine's family confirmed to the police that their daughter had not disappeared voluntarily, and that she would never leave her son behind. Upon searching the trailer, investigators discovered that Christine had left her handbag, shoes, clothes, and car behind. The only items missing were her nightdress and a white robe. The Lawrence County Sheriff's Office brought in tracking dogs to aid their investigation. According to the Salina Journal, bloodhounds brought from Springfield, Missouri apparently were able to pick up on Christine's scent from the trailer to the driveway. Once the dogs reached the spot where the family car was, they lost the scent. Investigators began to believe that Christine may have left in or had been forced into a vehicle. Christine's parents were critical of the Lawrence County Sheriff's Office's initial investigation. The bloodhound and ground searches were only conducted after 2 days had passed. At first, they believed that Christine had run away. Doyle also told the Lawrence County Record that dozens of officers smoked cigarettes outside the trailer, leaving the butts on the ground. This contaminated a possible crime scene, and little care was taken to secure the scene. Weeks, even months passed without any update in Christine's case. Tips and leads drizzled in, but none of them led anywhere. Months after Christine disappeared, Doyle and Trudy, Christine's parents, discovered that the county sheriff's office hadn't even made a file on Christine's case. The sheriffs defended their actions by saying at the time, deputies didn't think there was any need to create a file. Despite the evidence put before them, some officers with the Lawrence County Sheriff's Office held the opinion that Christine left of her own accord. On June 22, 1972, the Mexico Ledger reported a possible sighting of Christine. The article states that a witness was at Lee Church in Verona changing a tire when he heard something inside the church. When he stepped inside, he claimed to have seen a nude woman darting out the back door and over a ridge. Items found in the church suggested that someone had been there for quite some time. The witness told investigators that he was almost certain that the woman was Christine. There's no follow-up to this sighting, and it's never been confirmed. In 1974, 2 years after his wife disappeared, Lynn Seal remarried and moved to Georgia with David and his new wife. The couple went on to have 2 more children, and in 1979, Christine was declared deceased in absence. Christine's father, Doyle, offered a $25,000 reward for information. Doyle had obtained the money from a settlement after he was exposed to Agent Orange. In 2019, Doyle NICKLE passed away without ever knowing what happened to his daughter. David and Christine's surviving family continued to carry the torch in hope that one day they will uncover the truth. Anyone with information is asked to contact Sheriff Brad DeLay of Lawrence County Sheriff's Office at 417-466-2131, quoting case number 72001. Number 4. 30-year-old Joanne Ellen Hansen was regarded as a kind and gentle woman. Those in the neighborhoods of King County relished having Joanne as a neighbor. Joanne's 3 children happily played with the other neighborhood children, and to the outside world, it appeared as though Joanne had everything: a beautiful house, beautiful children, and a supportive husband. But behind closed doors, things were terribly different. Just days after Joanne made a life-changing decision, she disappeared under bizarre circumstances. In the mid-1950s, Joanne was a divorcee looking for love. She had been married once before to her high school sweetheart, but things unfortunately didn't work out. Several factors and incidents placed a significant strain on their relationship, leading to their untimely divorce. Once the dust had settled, Joanne was ready to go back out into the world, and that was when she met Robert Milton Hansen, also known as Bob. At first, Robert seemed like the perfect man. He took care of Joanne, and slowly the relationship blossomed. By 1956 and 57, the two were married and moved into a King County, Washington home. As the years passed, the couple had 3 children, 2 sons and a daughter, and things seemed to be going well. But behind closed doors, Robert was anything but the loving father and husband that he painted himself to be. One of Joanne's friends, Patricia Martin, was one of the only people who saw Robert for who he was. According to reports, Robert was extremely abusive towards Joanne and sometimes his children. Robert even assaulted Joanne while she was carrying their child, and this cruelty knew no end. When he wasn't doling out physical punishment, Robert verbally and emotionally abused Joanne. He would belittle her and control her movements. He even forbade JOAN and the children from having contact with anyone on her side of the family. JOAN's family later discovered the existence of JOAN's oldest child, as everything had been kept from them. The violence and abuse continued to escalate until one day JOAN decided that she'd endured enough. In May of 1962, JOAN and her 3 children hurriedly packed their bags while Robert was at work and fled to the home of Patricia Martin, JOAN's longtime friend. Patricia welcomed her friend with open arms and allowed them to stay with her as long as they needed. When JOAN was away from Robert, she came out of her shell. Shortly after moving in with Patricia, JOAN plucked up the courage to visit a solicitor and file for divorce on the grounds of mistreatment. All JOAN had to do was show the solicitor her injuries to back up her grounds for divorce. By the end of May 1962, the divorce proceedings were in motion, which infuriated Robert. The two then found themselves amid a property and money dispute. Robert's abuse and harassment towards JOAN continued. On August 8, 1962, JOAN filed a restraining order against her soon-to-be ex-husband, and the Washington courts swayed in her favor. The order was granted, and Robert was forced to move out of the home to allow JOAN and the children to live there. JOAN was making preparations to move back into the family home when the unthinkable happened. On August 10, 1962, JOAN was at home making preparations while on the phone with her friend, Patricia Martin. JOAN had also planned to meet her sisters at the World's Fair in Seattle later that afternoon. As the two chatted on the phone, JOAN's demeanor changed. Suddenly, she said, "Oh my, he's in the basement, he's coming." JOAN screamed and then the line went dead. Patricia panicked and called JOAN back, but she was met with a male voice. It was Robert. Patricia asked where JOAN was, and Robert coldly replied, "She's with you." In the coming days, JOAN failed to show up at the World's Fair or any other social events. Eventually, on August 15th of 1962, Robert HANSEN reported his wife missing. The Kings County Sheriff's Office arrived at the family home and found that the only thing missing was one of JOAN's favorite dresses, a blue sequin dress. JOAN's family knew that she would never abandon her children and pushed the sheriff's office to look further into the case. Weeks later, JOAN's Chevrolet Biscayne was found abandoned in Queen Anne Hill, Seattle. Investigators noted that all the tires were flat, the windows had been wound down, and the interior was filthy, starkly contrasting JOAN's neat and tidy ways. Cigarette butts, empty bottles, and food wrappers littered the car too. Unfortunately, no usable fingerprints were ever lifted from the car, only adding to the mystery. JOAN's family hired a private investigator, but they too had no luck in finding her. JOAN's children grew up believing that their mother had abandoned them and that she didn't want them. Robert continued to fight the courts for half of his divorce settlement, and eventually, in JOAN's absence, he was granted control of JOAN's half of the property. JOAN's children are now adults, and it took them many years to discover the truth of their mother's disappearance. In the mid-2000s, Robert disinherited his children to ensure that they would not receive a single penny from their mother's or his estate. Ty Hansen, JOAN's son, believes that his mother may be buried underneath a concrete slab at the family farm in Kent Valley, which sits along the Green River. Multiple searches have been conducted, but no sign of JOAN has ever been found. Anyone with information is asked to contact Detective Jim Allen of the King County Sheriff's Office at 206-296-4155, quoting case number 04255743. Number 3. In mid-1991, 22-year-old Kelly Jo McCrary was going through a rough patch. In the late 1980s to early 1990s, Kelly Huff met James McCrary. When the two first laid eyes on each other, sparks flew, and it seemed that they were the perfect match for each other. Kelly and James decided to give the relationship a shot, and months later, the two got married. Shortly after their wedding, they had 2 children, and the family lived together in Anderson, Indiana. For the first 2 years of their marriage, things were smooth sailing. Kelly picked up a full-time job, and the two did their best to juggle parenthood with their careers. By 1991, cracks in the relationship had begun to show. The stress of raising 2 children, well, a child and an infant, as well as working a full-time job and being in charge of the house, was all too much for Kelly. The two argued frequently, and Kelly confided in a few of her friends that she was having marital problems. It wasn't just arguments that Kelly was worried about, though. She also told her friends that she was terrified of her husband, James. Kelly was slowly trying to build up the confidence to leave him, but she felt that if she did, he would follow her and make her life difficult. Kelly's friends and family desperately tried to comfort her and offer her a safe place to stay, but she was too scared to leave. June 8th of 1991 would be the last time anybody saw Kelly McCrary alive again. During the day, Kelly looked after the children while James worked, with Kelly taking night shifts. At around 1 a.m. to 1:10 a.m., Kelly left her home in the 6900 block of South Main Street in Anderson to head to work. She worked from 2 a.m. to 10 a.m. at the CIC Enterprises in Indianapolis, a 43-mile drive from her home in Anderson. James later told investigators that he heard and saw his wife leaving in her 1981 Buick Century in the early morning hours before heading to bed. Hours later, James received a call that would shake his world. In the early morning hours of June 18, 1991, CIC Enterprises called the McCrary home to check up on Kelly. She had never arrived for her shift that morning, which was out of character. It's unclear who made the report, but Kelly was reported missing to the Madison County Sheriff's Department shortly after she failed to arrive at work. At first, the Madison County Sheriffs considered Kelly to be a runaway. Kelly was under a lot of pressure and stress from family, and the stress may have been exacerbated by work. Investigators also began to dive deeper into her husband, James McCrary, and something about his behavior and story didn't sit right with investigators. Just days after his wife mysteriously disappeared, James packed his things, grabbed his two young children, and moved to Linton, Indiana, over 134 miles away from Anderson. The more investigators looked into James, the more confident they became that he was involved. The Madison County Sheriff's Office, along with a team of volunteers and Kelly's loved ones, began their search. She had never made it to work, so where was she? Roads, bushes, forests, and private properties were searched, but there was no sign of Kelly. A few tips trickled in, but nothing substantial ever came of them. On June 28, 1991, 20 days after Kelly was last seen alive, investigators made a breakthrough. Her 1981 Buick Century was found abandoned in the Community Hospital North car park in Indianapolis, 30 miles south of Anderson. Kelly's car was notably pristine, as she liked it. There was no physical evidence within the car's interior to suggest that a struggle had occurred. Investigators were about to give up hope, but crime scene technicians asked them to open the back. Inside, investigators would find an odd piece of evidence. According to the Charlie Project, at least 29 strands of Kelly's hair were found in the back of the car. Crime scene investigators would have expected to find these strands inside the car, but not in the back. This new evidence raised questions about Kelly's disappearance. The Madison County Sheriff's Department made their usual inquiries and spoke to Kelly's coworkers, who told a harrowing tale. According to Kelly's coworkers, James had assaulted her before. Just a few weeks before she disappeared, Kelly arrived at work crying and panicking. She explained to her coworkers that she and James had gotten into an argument. Following the fight, James grabbed her and threw her to the ground, almost knocking her unconscious. He then restrained her hands and feet and threw her into the back of the car with the engine running. James left Kelly in the back while revving and starting the engine several more times, and this caused plumes of carbon monoxide to fill the car and the garage. Minutes later, James was finished and pulled an unconscious Kelly from the back of the vehicle. This account troubled her coworkers. They tried to convince her to leave him, but she stated that she was terrified he would come after her and her children. Without any proof or evidence, James McCrary remained a suspect in Kelly's case, and it quickly went cold. James continued to live his life, all but forgetting about his ex-wife who had disappeared. Over time, officers were assigned to new cases, and Kelly's case got placed on the bottom of the pile. In November of 1993, the Madison County Sheriff's Department received the call that they'd been waiting for. An anonymous witness, who was friends with James, claimed to have overheard him confessing to taking Kelly's life. The witness was brought in for questioning, and according to them, this is what really happened on June 7th and 8th of 1991. That day, James and Kelly had gotten into yet another argument. Something inside James boiled over and his rage got the better of him. During the argument, James threw Kelly headfirst into a table, rendering her unresponsive. The injury that Kelly sustained to her head ultimately took her life. James then claimed to have wrapped Kelly in a blanket before placing her in the back of his car. He never revealed the supposed location of where he had left her body. Shortly after this confession, James was arrested and taken to trial, where he proclaimed his innocence. He told the court that Kelly had perhaps taken off on her own, or that somebody had harmed her after she had car difficulties on her commute to work. A search of the home James and Kelly shared revealed even more forensic evidence. Several red splotches were found on the living room carpet. The defense and prosecution battled it out for days, desperately trying to get their side of the story across. Finally, it was time for the jury to deliberate and decide James's fate. For 9 hours, a jury of James's peers discussed the case and evidence presented before them. In a shocking turn, they found James not guilty due to a lack of evidence. Most jurors would later comment that they entered a plea of not guilty due to there being reasonable doubt in the case. While awaiting his trial, James was held in a county jail where he repeatedly bragged to his cellmates about his actions. He brazenly said, "No body, no crime," an eerie prediction for what was about to come. Due to double jeopardy laws, James can never be charged with Kelly's disappearance again, and he's allowed to walk away a free man. During interviews about his exoneration, James told media outlets that he loved his wife dearly and missed her. Kelly's friends and family and local community believe that James is likely behind Kelly's disappearance, but they're now stuck in legal limbo. Anyone with information is asked to contact Detective Jim Sundheimer of the Madison County Sheriff's Office at 765-646-4017, quoting case number C91F0426. Number 2. 22-year-old Gina Marie Ellison had already built herself a strong foundation. In 1990, Gina was a petty officer with the Naval Reserves in San Jose, California, and was also an accounting student at San Jose State University. Despite her young age, Gina knew what she wanted from life and wasn't afraid to go get it. By 1990, something inside Gina had changed. Her friends and family noticed that her behavior and personality had begun to slip and change. Before they could figure out what was happening, Gina disappeared under bizarre circumstances. While building a successful career and a successful academic career, Gina was also fostering a relationship. Months earlier, Gina married Andre Vance Nelson, an information systems operator at the Sunnyvale U.S. Air Force Base. The two had bonded over their armed forces experience, and in the beginning, it appeared to be the perfect match. As time passed, things slowly began to change, and Gina saw the real side of her husband. By June of 1990, Gina had already left Andre once, following a spate of arguments. Bizarrely, Gina returned to Andre after just a few weeks due to what her friends described as financial issues. It was clear to them that Gina was unhappy, but she did her best to put on a brave face. In 1988, Gina was involuntarily hospitalized due to mental health issues. Following an argument with Andre, she had threatened to harm herself and was subsequently sent for treatment. Gina was subjected to a psychological evaluation, the results of which have never been made public. All of these events would culminate in Gina's bizarre disappearance. According to Andre, the last time he saw his wife was at around 8 p.m. on June 19, 1990. Gina left their San Marino apartment located on Neiman Boulevard for her nightly jog, leaving behind her money, credit card, and keys. Gina's route was as follows: south from her apartment down Neiman Boulevard, then to Daniel Maloney Drive, to Silver Creek Road, north to Auburn Road, and then back to Neiman Boulevard and to the San Marino apartment complex. This route is around 2.7 miles, and Andre expected Gina to be gone no later than 9 p.m. When 10 p.m. came and there was no sign of his wife, Andre left the apartment and flagged down the first San Jose Police Department car that he saw. He relayed his concerns to the officer inside, and a missing person report was filed. Andre told investigators that he had been in the apartment all night, playing bass guitar, when he noticed his wife's jog was taking longer than usual. San Jose investigators immediately set about retracing Gina's last steps, but failed to find any evidence. GINA's friends and family were soon made aware of her disappearance, and they too turned up to help look for her. According to the San Jose Police Department, Andre was incredibly cooperative throughout the entire search. GINA's family and friends told investigators about their rocky relationship, but to this day, no evidence has surfaced to prove Andre's involvement. In October of 1990, Andre was discharged from the US Air Force after he failed mandatory substance screenings. Months later, in 1991, things would take another turn when Andre was charged with several bank robberies across San Jose. He was found guilty and sentenced to 16 years in prison, but was out on parole by 1999. This wasn't the only bizarre incident to occur in 1991. San Jose police received a disturbing anonymous call in 1991 from a witness who claimed that GINA Ellison was being held captive in Mountain View, California. The address provided was searched, but no trace of GINA was ever discovered. Investigators believe the call may have been a hoax, although it's never been ruled out. Anyone with information is asked to contact Maureen Burden of the San Jose Police Department at 408-277-8900, quoting case number 901-701-223. Number 1. 20-year-old Rochelle Rocky M. was a bright and loving young woman who was described as fun and full of life. Rochelle, who went by Rocky, had grown up in Phoenix, Arizona, and had many friends. Sometime in the 1980s, Rocky's family moved to San Diego, California, and Rocky had no issues settling in. Like in Arizona, Rocky made many friends, and all of them loved her. After graduating high school, she decided she wanted to become a paralegal. After several years of training and hard work, Rocky finally landed herself a job at a legal firm. One last weekend of fun in 1986 would result in every parent's worst nightmare. Rocky's parents were incredibly proud of their daughter. By July of 1986, Rocky had landed herself a job as a paralegal at a San Diego law firm. That month, Rocky received a call from an old family friend, Robert Yama. Robert had been employed as the family gardener in Phoenix, Arizona, and while there was an age gap, the pair seemed to get along well. The two chatted on the phone about Rocky's new job, and Robert hit her with the proposition. Rocky planned to visit Phoenix soon for a weekend with her friends. But Robert could do better. He agreed to pay for Rocky's flight out there, which meant that she only had to pay for her bus ticket home. Rocky agreed, and the two planned a trip for the weekend of July 12, 1986. After a short flight, Rocky touched down in Phoenix, and Robert eagerly awaited her at the airport. The two hopped into Robert's car and began planning their weekend. She visited a few friends and family members and prepared for July 12th, the big night. July 12th came around with Rocky and her friends preening and primping themselves for a party. Rocky's family believes that Robert was attracted to Rocky, which is why he flew her out there on his own dime. Rocky's sister Denise told 12 News, quote, "He was not happy that she was at a party instead of spending time with him. He kept calling through the night and then came to pick her up the next day." To this day, Denise is still unsure why her sister accepted the free flight. Her family were somewhat concerned with Robert's attraction to her, given the 12-year-plus age gap between the two. From reports, it appears Robert may have always admired Rocky and saw this as his chance to finally get her alone. On July 13, 1986, Rocky and her friends awoke with groggy heads from the night before. She confided in her friends that Robert had been calling her all evening, even going as far as chastising her for being at a party and not with him. Once Rocky had cleared her groggy head, she called Robert back and asked him to come and collect her. Rocky hugged her friends goodbye, promising that she would see them soon. But little did they know that this would be the last time she would ever be seen alive. Robert claims that he drove Rocky to 6th Street and Washington Street so that she could board a Greyhound bus back to San Diego. Robert claims to have dropped her off at around 11 a.m., which is the last confirmed sighting of her. The drive from Phoenix to San Diego should have taken around 5.5 to 6 hours. Rocky's parents eagerly awaited her call that evening, but the call never came. On July 14, 1986, the firm that Rocky was due to start at called her parents to let them know that she'd failed to show up for her first day at work. Rocky's parents immediately knew something was wrong and called the San Diego Police Department and the Phoenix Police Department. Investigators were keen to speak to Robert, who was the last person to see Rocky alive. As the investigation progressed, Robert's cooperation in the investigation dwindled. He refused to answer questions or assist in the search for Rocky. Detective Summershoe commented, quote, "She definitely didn't take a bus from Phoenix to San Diego. We know that." Unfortunately, there's no reports on whether Rocky had purchased a ticket or whether that ticket had been used on July 13th. It's believed that Robert harmed Rocky under the guise of taking her to the bus station. As previously mentioned, Robert was allegedly attracted to Rocky and was angry that she didn't want to spend any time with him. While this is the prevailing theory, a user on Web Sleuths presented another theory. This user commented that Rocky's friends later told investigators that Rocky had been using substances on July 12th and 13th. Rocky was diagnosed with diabetes as a child and depends on insulin injections. Due to her condition, she would be more susceptible to adverse reactions from substances. Rocky's mother was also critical of the initial response from the Phoenix Police Department. Due to her age, they dismissed her case, telling her mother that she had likely run off with a boyfriend and would be back soon. It would take weeks of Rocky's family putting pressure on them to take the case seriously, during which time valuable evidence and witnesses had been lost. Rocky's sister, Denise, was also critical of the lack of federal response in her sister's case. The FBI refused to get involved in the case because Rocky's family couldn't prove that a federal crime had taken place. This was similar to responses from other agencies. Rocky's sister keeps extensive notes and her own case file on her disappearance, in the hopes that one day they'll find out what happened to her. Robert Yama passed away in 2005 and has never been charged in Rocky's disappearance. Whatever knowledge he had has now been taken to the grave. Anyone with information is asked to contact Detective Stuart Summershoe of the Phoenix Police Department at 602-262-6151, quoting case number 1986-8609-6662. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked this video, be sure to hit that like button. Also, don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell to keep up to date with all of our future uploads. But my name is Ty Knotts, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.